It was 4:47 p.m. when I got a series of frantic texts from my son Jack. "Mom, something's wrong. Grandpa and Uncle Mason are moving our stuff." My heart dropped. Seconds later, a message from Emma Grandma says we're being moved to the basement. I don't want to go. It's cold and gross down here. I was halfway through a grueling 12-hour pediatric shift. My hands were shaking. I called home. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. The only thing louder than the beeping monitors around me was the sound of my own thoughts racing. My children, 10-year-old twins, were being shoved into a dark, unfinished basement like second-class citizens. No discussion. No warning. I'd been patient for 2 years. Grateful even after my divorce forced me and my kids to move in with my parents. I worked insane shifts just to save enough to start over. I followed every rule, bit my tongue through every slight, but this was the moment everything changed. That was the exact second I realized this wasn't about space. It was about worth. And my children had just been told by their own family that they weren't worth the room they slept in. When I pulled into the driveway that evening, the sky had already darkened and the air was thick with autumn chill. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I had spent the past hour finishing up documentation pacing while waiting for backup and replaying those text messages from Jack and Emma over and over in my head. I wasn't sure what I would find inside, but I knew I couldn't let them think this was normal. That being shunted into a damp, moldy basement was just another part of growing up. Inside the house was strangely quiet. Jack and Emma were huddled on the living room couch, their eyes puffy from crying. Emma clung to her clarinet case like a security blanket, while Jack kept his head down, his fingers nervously tapping on his sketchbook. I crossed the room and knelt in front of them. "Are you okay?" I asked softly, brushing Emma's hair from her face. She nodded stiffly. "They didn't even ask us. Grandpa just said we had to move because Ethan needs the upstairs room." Jack muttered, "They said he's more important." A fire ignited in my chest. I kissed both their foreheads and stood up. "Stay here. I'm going to talk to Grandma." In the kitchen, my mother and Melissa were chatting over mugs of tea, their voices calm, their bodies relaxed, completely indifferent to the emotional wreckage they'd just inflicted. "I just got home from work," I said tightly. "Can someone explain to me why my children's things were moved without my permission?" Melissa barely looked up. "We needed to make space. Ethan needs a nursery, and I need a quiet space to work." The basement made the most sense. The basement is unfinished. It has mold, it's cold, and there's barely any ventilation. "Jack has asthma," I said, struggling to stay calm. My mother shrugged. "He'll be fine. They're kids. They're resilient." "Would you have put Ethan down there?" I demanded. My mother paused, then shook her head. "Of course not. He's a baby. He needs proper care. And Jack and Emma don't." My voice cracked. Melissa sighed, clearly irritated. "Look, we didn't mean to upset anyone. It's just a better arrangement for everyone." "No, it's better for you," I snapped. "You didn't even have the decency to speak to me before making that decision." Before the conversation could continue, my father walked in with my brother Mason, who was bouncing baby Ethan on his hip like a trophy. My dad grinned when he saw me. "Oh, good, you're home. We were just getting everything set up. The carpet's down in the basement, and we moved the dressers. They're all set." "You moved their furniture?" I asked, stunned. He nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. "They should be grateful they have a roof over their heads." Grateful. That word again. As if we were freeloaders, not family. As if I hadn't been working 12-hour shifts, contributing to the bills, cooking half the meals, cleaning up after everyone, including Mason and Melissa, and raising two kind, resilient kids under intense emotional pressure. "They deserve better," I said simply. "They deserve more than moldy corners and old carpet scraps." Mason rolled his eyes. "You're overreacting, Amanda. We all shared rooms growing up. It didn't kill us. You didn't share space with black mold and broken windows," I snapped back. "They'll adjust," my dad muttered, already heading back toward the den. It was like arguing with a wall. No matter what I said, they had already decided that Stephen's family's needs were valid and mine were negotiable. That night, after tucking the twins into makeshift beds in the cold basement, I sat in the living room. Lights dimmed and stared at the wall. My thoughts spiraled. I thought about how my children were internalizing all of this, how they had stopped asking to show Grandma their schoolwork, how they instinctively quieted their voices when Ethan was around, how Emma had stopped practicing clarinet altogether, despite how proud she'd been of her progress just weeks earlier. I remembered something my coworker Nancy once told me during a shift when I looked particularly worn out. "Amanda, if someone treated your patients the way your family treats your kids, you'd report them." She was right. So I made a decision. The next morning, I called a realtor friend I trusted. "I need to get out," I said. "Somewhere small, somewhere safe." "Let's meet for lunch," she said. "I'll bring some listings." And so it began quietly. Strategically, I didn't tell my parents. I didn't even tell the kids. I wasn't going to give anyone a chance to sabotage the escape plan. Over the next few weeks, I worked extra shifts, skipped takeout, and sold a few items online, anything to build my emergency cushion. I browsed rentals during lunch breaks and printed out photos at work, so I could imagine something different, something better. At home, things only worsened. Melissa complained that the twins' backpacks were cluttering the hallway, even though Ethan's stroller and toys were everywhere. My mother made passive-aggressive remarks at dinner about how Jack and Emma needed to learn gratitude, usually after she'd spent the entire meal gushing over Ethan's newest milestone. One Sunday during a family meal, Ethan threw an entire plate of mashed peas onto the floor. Everyone laughed. "He's just exploring," Melissa said cheerfully. 10 minutes later, when Jack asked if there was another dinner option because he didn't like the lasagna, my mother scolded him harshly. "When I was your age, we ate what we were given." Jack's eyes fell to his plate. He didn't say another word for the rest of the night. That evening, he showed me a drawing. He made a cramped, dark room with two stick figures and a sad face in the corner. "This is our room," he said. "But I made the ceiling higher so we can breathe." I didn't cry. I wanted to, but I didn't. I just kissed his head and promised him that we would get out soon. Every time I turned on the lights in that cold basement, every time I heard Melissa complain about something trivial, every time I saw my children shrink a little more, I counted down the days until we were gone. And one Friday morning, my realtor called. "The place is yours, Amanda. You're approved. Move-in is November 1st. I stood in the hospital supply room phone, pressed to my ear hand, trembling. "Are you sure?" I whispered. "Keys are ready. All you have to do is say yes." "Yes," I said. 1,000 times yes. The final straw came on a crisp Tuesday afternoon. I was deep into a 12-hour hospital shift when a barrage of messages lit up my phone. I had been so busy that I hadn't even checked it during my brief lunch break. But the moment I saw Jack's name on the screen, I knew something was wrong. "Mom, something weird is happening. Grandpa and Uncle Mason are moving our stuff. From Emma, Grandma says we have to move to the basement. This is not fair." Then Jack, again, "Mom, please come home." They took all our things downstairs. "Emma, again, I hate it here. The basement is cold and gross, and there are spiders." I left my sandwich untouched. My fingers trembled as I tried to call home. No answer. Tried both kids' phones. Still nothing. I alerted my supervisor, explaining the emergency. "Go," she said without hesitation. "Family comes first." It still took me nearly an hour to hand over patient charts and finish time-sensitive documentation before I could leave. The drive home felt endless. Every red light was a curse. Every second wasted felt like a betrayal to my children. When I finally opened the front door, the house felt unnaturally quiet. I rushed into the living room. There they were, Jack and Emma, curled up on the couch, their faces blotchy with tears, backpacks tossed on the floor, like after a particularly bad school day. I dropped my purse and ran to them. "What happened?" I asked, kneeling between them. "They just moved our stuff," Emma whispered. "Didn't even ask. Uncle Mason said we don't deserve the good rooms anymore." Jack added, staring at the floor. A hot wave of rage coursed through me, but I held it down. My kids needed me calm. "I'll handle it," I promised. I marched into the kitchen. My mother sat sipping tea with Melissa, both acting as if nothing had happened. "Why are Jack and Emma's things in the basement?" I demanded. Melissa spoke first, not even looking up. "We rearrange things to make space. I need an office now that I'm working remotely, and Ethan needs a proper nursery. So you decided to move my children to a damp, unfinished basement without speaking to me." My mother finally looked up. It was the logical solution. "Your children are older. They can adapt. Ethan's a baby. The basement has mold," I said, flatly. "It's freezing at night. The window doesn't even open. Jack has asthma." "They'll be fine," Melissa muttered. I stared at her, stunned. Would you put Ethan down there? Her silence told me everything. At that moment, my father and Mason walked in through the back door. Oh, good. You're home, Dad said, cheerfully, completely unfazed. We've made some changes. Put down extra lights, laid out some carpet scraps. It's fine down there. Did it ever occur to any of you to ask me? First, I asked. Mason shrugged. You weren't here. I was at work, providing for my children. We all work. Amanda Melissa said, rolling her eyes. I turned to my father. You've made it clear who matters in this house. And it's not Jack and Emma. Don't be dramatic, he snapped. They're lucky to have a place to stay at all. Lucky. That word landed like a slap. I walked back to the living room. Jack and Emma looked up at me, their faces tense. Pack your bags, I said quietly. They blinked. Pack what's most important to you. We'll come back for the rest tomorrow. My father followed me, voice rising. Don't be ridiculous. No one is telling you to leave. You already did, I replied, still calm. When you said Ethan deserves the best rooms and my kids should be in the basement. Stephen had appeared. Now Ethan perched on his hip, looking confused. Can we just talk about this like adults? This isn't about talking, I replied. It's about action. You made a decision. I'm making mine. As the kids rushed upstairs to pack, my mother appeared face flushed. You can't just leave, she snapped. We've given you everything. I turned to her, and I've been grateful. But gratitude doesn't mean letting you treat my children like they're less. Stephen scoffed. You're overreacting. It's just bedrooms. I laughed bitterly. If I'd moved Ethan to the basement without telling you, would you have reacted the same? The room fell silent. My mother tried one last guilt trip. We've helped you for 2 years, and this is how you repay us. No, I said. You've helped me conditionally. I've contributed. I've respected your house. But you've crossed a line. Jack and Emma returned bags in hand. Emma held her clarinet. Jack clutched his drawing pad and stuffed dragon. We're ready, Mom, Emma said. My father's voice thundered behind us. If you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcomed back. I turned, looked him in the eye. I stopped expecting that a long time ago. They watched from the porch as I buckled my children into the car. Melissa still looked smug, arms crossed. My mother looked shaken. My father was red with rage. Please, Amanda, my mother said. You're overreacting. I rolled down the window. We'll talk tomorrow when I come back for the rest of our things. And where are you going to go? She asked, voice breaking. Somewhere my kids are treated like they matter, I said simply. As we drove away, Emma stared out the window. Are we really moving to our own house? She asked. Almost, I replied. We're staying with a friend until then. Jack looked at me in the rearview mirror. Is it because of what Grandpa and Grandma said? It's because we deserve to be in a place where we're respected, I said. What they did today proved we can't stay. At Nancy's house, she welcomed us with warmth, offering her guest room ice cream and a rented movie. My kids curled up on the couch, slowly unwinding from the trauma of the day. Later that night, Nancy pulled me aside. "You did the right thing," she said. "It takes guts to walk away from family." "I just wish I'd done it sooner," I admitted. She smiled. "You're doing it now. That's what matters." That night, as the kids slept beside me, I felt something new. Not fear, not sadness, peace. The next morning, I woke up before the twins. Nancy had made coffee and set out a plate of toast and fruit, like it was the most natural thing in the world to host a mother and her two displaced kids on short notice. I stood in her kitchen, looking out the window, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel dread clawing at my stomach. I felt clarity. After dropping the kids off at school, I returned to Nancy's house and began making arrangements. I called in a personal day at work and loaded up the car with empty boxes. It was time to go back and get the rest of our things. As I pulled into my parents' driveway, everything looked the same. Same garden gnomes on the porch, same wind chimes swaying lazily in the breeze. But nothing felt the same. I was not the same. And I wasn't coming back to plead. I was coming back to claim what belonged to us. My father opened the door. His expression was unreadable. "Back already?" he asked. I nodded. "We're here to pack." He looked behind me, saw the twins stepping out of the car. His eyes softened a bit, but not enough. "I hope you've calmed down," he muttered. "I wasn't the one who made a rash decision," I said. Inside, my mother sat on the couch, eyes red from what might have been crying, or insomnia, or both. She looked up at us, her voice heavy. "We didn't mean to hurt anyone." "But you did," I replied simply. As Jack and Emma headed upstairs to pack, I turned to my parents. "This isn't about revenge or punishment. I just need to do what's right for my kids." "You crossed a boundary." "You act like we kicked you out," my father snapped. "You left. You moved my kids into a moldy basement and told them they didn't deserve the upstairs. What did you expect me to do? Thank you." He looked away. We packed in silence for a while. As I helped Emma gather her books and sports gear, she asked, "Will we still see them?" "Yes," I said. "But when it's safe, emotionally, I mean, and on our terms." Downstairs, as I loaded the final box into the car, someone knocked on the door. It was Aunt Susan. She gave me a long hug. "I heard what happened," she said. "Are you okay?" "I am now." She nodded. "I've been worried about how they treat your kids. I just didn't know how to bring it up. That's why I needed to leave," I told her. "They thought I wouldn't, that I couldn't." Susan glanced toward the house, then back at me. "Sometimes you have to show people what your silence never could." Her words hit me deep. Later that week, the silence from my parents was deafening. No texts, no calls, not even, "Let us know when you're settled." I knew they were angry, maybe embarrassed, but I didn't miss the noise. I relished the peace. The twins were thriving even in transition. At Nancy's, they giggled like they hadn't in months, sprawled out on the living room floor, building Lego castles and dueling with action figures. Emma practiced her clarinet again this time without being told to stop. Jack filled pages of his sketch pad with robots and dragons and intricate imaginary worlds. They were decompressing finally. At night, once they were asleep, I sat in bed with my laptop, finalizing utility transfers and furniture deliveries for the new house. It felt surreal, this life I'd dreamed of, in whispers now taking form, piece by piece. By the end of the week, I had the keys. I didn't tell my parents, but I did tell the kids. We were sitting at a small diner, our new little Friday night ritual, when I slid the keys across the table. "What's this?" Jack asked. "Our new house," I said, trying not to cry. Emma's eyes lit up. "For real?" "For real," I nodded. 3 bedrooms, 10 minutes from school, close to the park, and all ours. They stared at the keys like they were magic, and in a way, they were. That Sunday, I got an unexpected visit, my mother. She showed up at Nancy's door with a pie and a worried expression. "I just want to talk," she said. We sat outside on the porch while the twins played inside. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "I didn't think you'd actually leave." "That's part of the problem," I replied. "You didn't think I could. I just thought you needed us," she whispered. "I needed support," I corrected. "But I didn't need control. And I definitely didn't need my children being treated like burdens in the only place they called home." She looked away. "I suppose we got caught up in helping Mason and Melissa at our expense," I said. "That's what hurt most. It wasn't just neglect, it was active dismissal. I never meant to make them feel less," she said. "But you did," I replied softly, "and they remember." My mother dabbed at her eyes. "I want to fix it. I don't know how." "Start by listening, by not excusing it, by not making it about your intentions, but about how they felt. Then go from there." She nodded slowly. "Could we come visit the new place sometime?" "In time," I said. "Let us settle first. Then maybe. But this is our boundary now. You come in with respect, or you don't come in at all." She nodded again, and for the first time I thought maybe she understood. Not completely, but enough. Later that night, I told Nancy about the conversation. "You handled it perfectly," she said. "I just want peace," I admitted. "And you'll have it," she replied. "Because you finally stopped asking for space and took it." That was the moment my perspective truly shifted. I had spent so much of my adult life trying to prove I was worthy of my parents' approval, of their help, of their love. I contorted myself into the perfect daughter mold, all while carrying the weight of my children's hurt, like it was my own shame. But now I saw it clearly. I didn't owe anyone my silence in exchange for shelter. I didn't have to be endlessly grateful for support that came with strings. And I certainly didn't need to let any one family or not decide my children's worth. Our value wasn't conditional. It never had been. Moving day came on the first Saturday of November. The sky was clear, the air crisp, and for the first time in nearly 2 years, I felt like I was breathing in freedom. Nancy and a few coworkers from the hospital showed up early, coffee in hand, ready to help. They didn't ask questions or offer pity. They just lifted, packed, and carried alongside me, like it was the most natural thing in the world. That in itself felt like a miracle. The house was small but charming. 3 bedrooms, a modest kitchen, with large windows that flooded the space, with light, a backyard, just big enough for the kids to run around in, and a little alcove under the stairs that Jack immediately claimed as his secret artist corner. As the last box was carried in, I took a quiet moment in the living room. The air was filled with the scent of cardboard and new beginnings. The kids were upstairs, already picking out walls for posters and arguing over curtain colors. My coworkers were in the kitchen laughing over pizza, and I stood there, keys in my hand, realizing I had done it. No strings, no guilt, just us. That evening, once everyone left and the house fell quiet, I sat on the living room floor beside Jack and Emma, eating pizza off paper plates, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. "This is our house," I said softly. "All ours." Emma looked around wide-eyed. "I don't have to ask anyone if I can practice anymore." "Nope," I smiled. "This is your space." Jack grinned. "Even the fridge. Can I put my art on it again?" "Yes, baby. Anything you want." He ran to his backpack, pulled out a drawing of a dragon perched on a castle, and stuck it to the refrigerator door with the strongest magnet he could find. The next few days were filled with firsts. First night in their own bedrooms. First breakfast where no one criticized what they ate. First time Emma practiced clarinet without being told she was too loud. First time Jack didn't flinch when someone opened a door suddenly. Even the smallest things felt huge. On Monday, I returned to work, energized in a way I hadn't felt in years. My supervisor pulled me aside before rounds. "We've been watching you," she said. "You've stepped up so much this year. There's an opening for a charge nurse. We think you'd be perfect." I was stunned. The position came with more responsibility, but also better hours and a substantial raise. "I'd love to," I said, barely believing it. That promotion changed everything. With the new salary, I could comfortably cover rent, save a little each month, and maybe someday soon plan for home ownership. But more than the money, it gave me something I hadn't had in a long time: professional validation. A reminder that I was capable, strong, and steady, even when everything around me felt unstable. Back at home, the kids were blossoming. Jack's teacher emailed me to say he was more engaged in class and seemed happier. Emma's band instructor invited her to audition for the advanced group. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were thriving. One evening, while working on a puzzle in the living room, Emma looked up and said, "I like it here, Mom. It feels like I can breathe." Out of all the praise I'd received at work from friends, that was the one that meant the most. Because that was the entire reason I left. Not just to escape, but to build something better. About 2 weeks after the move, we were invited to Sunday dinner at my parents' house. I hesitated, but I also knew that avoiding them forever wasn't the lesson I wanted to teach my kids. So we went. It was awkward, of course. The atmosphere was strained, like everyone was trying to play a part in a script that no longer fit. Stephen and Melissa were quieter than usual, their usual smugness noticeably absent. My father greeted us stiffly. My mother tried too hard to be cheerful, but we endured. And afterward, in the car, Jack said it wasn't terrible, but it didn't feel like home. That's okay, I told him, because it's not anymore. A few weeks later, I heard through the family grapevine that Stephen and Melissa were struggling. Without me around to help cook, clean, and quietly smooth over chaos, they were finding it harder to manage. My mother confessed during a phone call that she was exhausted and starting to realize just how much I had taken on while living there. I didn't appreciate it at the time, she admitted, but I do now. I thanked her, but didn't offer to come back and rescue them. That wasn't my role anymore. The holidays came and went. We hosted our own small Thanksgiving. Just me, the kids, Nancy, and a couple of friends. It was simple, joyful, and free of passive-aggressive comments. At Christmas, Jack gave me a drawing of our house, complete with stick figures in the windows, him, Emma, and me. Above it, he had written in bold letters, home. It wasn't about square footage or decor. It was about safety, love, and belonging. We had found all three. And now, with more room to grow, I started dreaming again, dreams I had shelved for years. Maybe I'd go back to school part-time. Maybe I'd start a side project I'd always thought about. Maybe we'd even get a dog. The possibilities weren't just distant hopes anymore. They were real, tangible, ours for the taking. We had crossed the threshold from surviving to living, and I wasn't going to let anything take that away from us again. By early spring, our little rental house had transformed. What once was a bare-bones space full of boxes and borrowed furniture had become undeniably ours. There were fingerprints on the fridge from impromptu cooking nights, art taped proudly on the walls, muddy sneakers by the front door from weekend soccer, and books scattered on every surface. It wasn't a designer home, but it was alive with laughter, creativity, and peace. And it was the first time in years we could all just be ourselves, without fear of criticism or comparison. For the twins, the changes were remarkable. Jack's anxiety, once a near daily burden, had faded. He was sleeping through the night, again cracking jokes, building elaborate Lego worlds, and submitting his art for school contests. His teacher even emailed me to say he'd nominated Jack for a local art mentorship program. Emma, once silenced by household quiet rules, now played her clarinet loudly and often. She'd made the advanced band and was practicing confidently in her room door, open windows wide. One night, after a particularly beautiful solo, I applauded from the hallway. She beamed. Grandma used to say I was too loud. She was wrong, I said. You're powerful. We hugged. No more whispers, no more shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. As for me, I was still adjusting to what it meant to have autonomy again. I didn't need to tiptoe anymore. I didn't need to apologize for existing. At work, I flourished in my new role. As charge nurse, I was mentoring younger staff, coordinating patient care more effectively, and contributing to policy improvements. My shifts were regular now, which meant more dinners with the kids, fewer missed bedtime stories, and most importantly, space to breathe. But the biggest shift came inside me. For so long, I had equated family loyalty with sacrifice. I thought that being a good daughter meant enduring mistreatment in silence, especially if it came wrapped in support. But I had learned the hardest and most freeing truth of all: setting boundaries isn't rejection, it's protection. The conversations with my parents didn't stop entirely, but they changed. Instead of guilt-tripping me into compliance, my mother slowly began to ask, not assume. She called to ask how Jack and Emma were doing, and this time she listened. During one visit, she brought Emma a set of new reeds for her clarinet and apologized for once calling her too much. It wasn't a sweeping apology, but it was a start. As for my father, his pride still stood tall, but there were cracks forming. During a Sunday dinner, months after we'd left, he sat next to Jack, watching him sketch a dragon over dinner. "You're really talented," he said, surprising all of us. Jack blinked, then smiled shyly. "Thanks, Grandpa." Even the smallest moments of recognition meant something. But I didn't allow those crumbs of growth to erase the past. I kept our boundaries clear. We visited once a month, no overnights, no extended stays, and I no longer brought up family plans if it seemed like our presence was optional. I had stopped trying to force equal footing in a family system that wasn't built for fairness. Instead, I built something new. We had our own family rituals now. Friday pizza and puzzle nights, Sunday walks in the park, Tuesday dinners where Emma picked the menu and Jack picked the music. There were no golden grandchildren in our house, no hierarchy of value, just three people trying their best and loving each other without condition. And perhaps the most surprising shift was how the extended family responded. Aunt Susan became a regular fixture. She stopped by with cookies, asked the twins about school, helped Emma fix a broken clarinet reed, and even offered to drive Jack to an art exhibit. She had seen the dysfunction too, and without my silence shielding it, she had chosen to act. Other relatives reached out too. A cousin invited us to a cookout. An uncle sent Jack a sketchbook for his birthday. The silence was breaking slowly but surely. Even my coworkers noticed. "You seem lighter," Nancy told me one evening during a slow shift. "I feel lighter," I said honestly. "I think I stopped carrying things that weren't mine." She nodded, understanding. That's what healing looks like. One afternoon, Emma brought up the past while we were gardening in the backyard. "Mom, do you think Grandma and Grandpa really loved us?" I paused, brushing dirt from my gloves. "I think they loved us the only way they knew how," I said. "But sometimes love is buried under fear, favoritism, or old habits. And that's not okay, but it doesn't mean we're unlovable." Emma nodded slowly. "I don't hate them. I just don't want to live there again." "Good," I said, "because we never will." Jack chimed in from the porch. "Can we paint the shed dragon green this weekend?" I smiled. "Absolutely." Every week we added something new to our lives. A coat of paint, a new recipe, a silly tradition. And with each addition, we let go of something old, a fear, a memory, a story someone else had written for us. We were writing our own now. When Stephen and Melissa reached out once via email, I kept it short and polite. They wanted to talk things out, perhaps out of guilt or social pressure, but I wasn't interested in reconciliation that didn't begin with accountability. I didn't need to open old wounds just to prove I'd healed. I had nothing to prove. The last piece of the puzzle clicked into place in April when the twins and I were curled up watching a documentary on wolves. Emma turned to me mid-scene. "Mom, I think we're like wolves." I raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "Because wolves protect their pack," she said, "and they never let anyone push the pups to the edge." Tears welled in my eyes unbidden. She was right. We had become our own pack. Small, resilient, fierce when needed, protective always. And while the past still lingered in memory, it no longer defined us. We weren't victims of our story anymore. We were the authors. 6 months after we packed our bags and walked out of that house, the one that was supposed to be our safety net, but instead became a cage, I found myself standing in the kitchen of a place that actually felt like home. The morning sun poured through the windows, dancing across the counters, where Jack was slicing bananas for his cereal, and Emma was humming as she packed her gym bag. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was peaceful, and that peace felt revolutionary. There was no chaos, no tension, no sense that we had to be on our best behavior to earn someone's approval. We were simply living, and after everything we'd been through, that felt like a miracle. That afternoon, I stopped by the post office and found a handwritten envelope in our mailbox. The return address read, "Mom and Dad." I paused, fingers tightening slightly. Inside was a note, written in my mother's familiar cursive. "Amanda, we know we've made mistakes, too many to name in one letter. We didn't see things clearly until after you left. It was never about Ethan being more loved. It was about old patterns we didn't even know we were following. You opening your own home didn't just change your life, it changed ours too. We are trying to be better, if you'll let us." It wasn't a full apology, but it was something. I folded the letter and tucked it into the drawer where I kept old cards from the kids and milestone mementos. Not because I planned to reread it often, but because it marked a turning point. Acknowledgement. A start. 2 weeks later, we had them over for dinner for the first time. It was simple. Tacos and lemonade. The kids were polite, but cautious. Jack showed Grandpa his latest sketchbook, but didn't press when he barely commented. Emma played a short melody on her clarinet, and Grandma clapped, trying to make eye contact. They were learning, slowly, haltingly, but the most important part, we weren't seeking their approval anymore. We were sharing space, but not surrendering our peace. The next day, as we cleaned up leftovers, Emma asked, "Do you think they've really changed?" I thought about it for a long moment before answering. "I think they're trying. But the bigger change is us. We don't need them to be different in order to be okay anymore." Emma nodded. "That's true." That was the moment I really knew we were free. We had stopped begging to belong in someone else's story and started writing our own. Jack joined the school's art program and had his work selected for a community exhibition. Emma made the soccer team and took first chair in band. And I, after years of operating in survival mode, finally started to dream again. One evening in May, I stood in the backyard watching Jack and Emma chase each other around our tiny patch of grass. I had just gotten off a manageable shift. The dinner dishes were done, and the sound of laughter echoed against the fence. I looked around at our modest home walls, covered in drawings, fridge cluttered with honor roll certificates, a calendar filled with practices and game days and half-planned camping trips, and I thought, this is it. Not the chaos, not the fear, not the conditions. This is what it means to be home, to be safe, to be enough. A few weeks later, I sat down at my laptop and opened a blank document. I'd been asked to give a talk at a local women's shelter about rebuilding after family dysfunction, and I wasn't sure how to begin. But then I remembered something Emma had said months ago. We're like wolves, Mom. So I typed, sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is walk away from the people who taught you to doubt your worth. And sometimes leaving isn't just an ending. It's the beginning of everything that matters. We are not broken. We're just unbound. 6 months after that, we bought a house. Our house. Not just rented, not borrowed. Ours. It had scuffed floors and chipped paint and the world's smallest bathroom, but it was perfect. We painted the front door bright blue. Emma picked the color. Jack helped install solar lights on the walkway. I planted herbs outside the kitchen window. And on move-in day, we stood in the living room, boxes half unpacked, and did a happy dance that would have made our old neighbors stare in confusion. Later that night, as we sat on the porch, watching the stars blink awake, Jack asked, "So this is our forever home?" I wrapped my arms around both of them. "No," I said, "forever isn't in the walls. It's in us." We had left behind what no longer served us, and in doing so, we had stepped into something far more powerful than forgiveness or reconciliation. We had stepped into freedom. Sometimes the most painful realizations come from the people we love the most. Amanda's story reminds us that family isn't defined by blood alone, but by respect, compassion, and mutual support. When those values are absent, it's not betrayal to walk away. It's survival. Setting boundaries with loved ones doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally care enough about yourself and your children to stop tolerating harm disguised as help. Too often, we're taught to stay silent, to keep peace at all costs, even if it costs us our sense of worth. But there's power in saying no more. Amanda didn't just escape a toxic situation, she built something stronger in its place. She showed her children that love is not just what we say, but how we treat people, especially when no one's watching. And she proved that the hardest decisions, leaving, starting over, speaking up, are often the ones that lead to healing. The truth is, you can't force people to value you, but you can refuse to shrink yourself to fit their comfort. And when you do, that's when the real freedom begins. If you find yourself in a situation where family dynamics are draining your joy, stifling your voice, or harming your children, know that you're not alone and you're not powerless. Start small. Journal your feelings. Talk to a trusted friend. Identify what boundaries need to be set. And when you're ready, make a plan. It might take months or years like Amanda, but progress is progress. Save what you can. Ask for help where it's safe. And remember, leaving doesn't always mean closing the door forever. It means prioritizing peace over permission. You deserve to live in a home where your children don't feel like burdens, where they can breathe, dream, and grow. And you deserve to be the version of yourself that isn't constantly apologizing for simply existing. Start with one brave step. The rest will follow.